Hello and welcome, everyone. It has been a minute since we've done a book launch for Julie Connor and her publishing company, Bayou City Press. And today we're doing one for Ettore, and he is doing the 9 Lives of Tito di Emilia. And I'm sure you both are going to pronounce that way more elegantly than I did, because I know I totally butchered that. So I'm excited to hear you guys talk to us about that book and the name and the way it just flows off of y'all's tongues. I know it's going to be beautiful, but I'm so excited to get to join you guys on the celebration of the day of your launch of your book coming out and celebrating all the success that I know it is going to have. So, Julie, let's get you guys talking about this book and how you guys met.
Good morning, good evening, everyone, whenever you're watching the show. I'm so happy to be with you today. Amy and I go back a number of years, so thank you, Amy, for doing this for us. I consider myself extremely lucky. Through a mutual friend, I got introduced to Ettore, and Ettore was interested in having his book, which is already published in Italian in Italy in 2020. He was interested in having an English language translation. So we talked about it and we agreed that it would be a good project for Bayou City Press. And I told him about our small publisher status and what that meant. And he agreed. So I'm so happy and I'm thrilled about this book.
I love it. I love it. And we're just translating it. And it's, I would, if I could read Italian and, speak it as beautifully as you guys do, I would, probably prefer to read it in Italian. But I'm excited about the journey of translating it into English. Julie, you always bring me fascinating and unique circumstances and books on how you meet in the books that you publish are always so fascinating. And so I want to kind of dive into, what that process was like for you guys, right? In terms of publishing your book and getting it translated. And so tell us a little bit about that journey, because that's a journey most authors don't generally get the experience to do, and having their book translated and figuring all that out. So tell us how that journey was.
Well, you're absolutely right. This is the first translation that I've worked on, but I didn't do the translation. Ettore did it himself. So as you will hear when he's talking, he's fluent in English. Having said that, there's a difference between understanding spoken English and reading English on the page. So he gave me a full manuscript, all translated, and then I set to work editing. And there was quite a lot of editing to do. So that meant emails back and forth across the Atlantic, asking questions, asking him to clarify points, asking what certain things meant, terms that I didn't understand, like spelt. We can talk about spelt or faro or other things. I just didn't understand what they were, so we had to talk about it and then decide how to use that language in the text. And then we talked about things that I would like to add to the Italian version. So I call it now a version, not a translation, because there are added elements that don't appear in the original, such as maps, a list of characters for each chapter, a list of unusual terms for non-Italians, and so forth. So I think all of these elements help a non-Italian understand the book better. So I was trying to add value to the book, to the Italian version. And then there's just stylistic things. Ettore and I talked about this. I think Italians are very used to reading just text without images, whereas we're more inclined to want images. So there'd be a book on his page in Italian where the whole page is one paragraph. It's just like reading Faulkner for English readers. For me, it's too much. So I'm editing, breaking long paragraphs into shorter paragraphs, and then working with Ettore to find images that can enhance the text. So it was quite a strenuous work, I would say. The good part is I had a totally cooperative author who responded quickly and always positive in helping me figure out how we should make the book the best it can be for English speakers.
I love that. I love when there's a good, publisher author relationship, because sometimes those can be hit or miss. So I'm glad that, especially with the long distance communication that you guys were doing, that's just, man, I get caught up on time zones, right? Just here in the States, I'm like, oh man, are you 2 or 3 hours? How's that going? So I can't imagine doing that, just internationally. That's just difficult for me just to think about it. But I would love to kind of hear, Ettore, so how that process was like for you, because we are, like Julie said, we do have to have, visual stimulations in books. Can't just read one paragraph, which is, a good and a bad thing. I think sometimes it's overstimulating sometimes and breaks it up and gives us a break from it. So what was the process like for you, kind of having to, take that feedback and implement it and all that?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your show. I really appreciate it, and I have to say that the working with Julie has been really wonderful. I mean, I really wanted this book to be available for the American market because I have many friends here in the States or in England, in Australia, and they were all asking me, why don't you translate the book? I said, well, it's not that easy. But I started to do it with my English, which is, I think, good, but not a literary English. So Julie was very helpful in this to adjust what I translated. But the importance of having me doing the first draft was important to keep the feeling that I put in the Italian version, and the importance of keeping the original atmosphere of the book. Um, this is a very personal book, I have to say, because it traces the history of my town in Umbria, which is a town that is 32 centuries old. Is considered one of the oldest organized settlements in central Italy. It's 4 centuries older than Rome, and it has been a very important city because being right in the center of Italy, uh, it has been like a crossroad for all the population that were going through up and down the peninsula. And also, the other very important storyline is my family heritage, my family history. I can go back with documents, with real documents up to the 1300, documents that are in the National Archives. And in my family, there has been so many people that have worked or helped the city towards the centuries, but also they moved to Rome, especially in the Renaissance. We had in the family 3 bishops. One then became a cardinal, and they were in the Renaissance very relevant in the building of the Basilica of St. Peter in Rome. So there's a lot of history, a lot of things to say. And then there is this, I had to find a connection with all this. And the cat, my cat, that unfortunately died a few years ago, inspired me to use his 9 lives as a connection between the eras that I chose, 9 different eras of the story of the city, which I chose because there were important events or important historical figures that passed through Amelia. And so the cat is his reincarnations during the centuries are a way to tell the story of the city and the family.
Okay, one, I think you're just awesome because you're just listening to you talk about like your family heritage and how all it came about. I want to dive into that for a minute if that's okay with you. What was your process like for history? Because it seems like you know a lot. I'm gonna say that I'm sure some things were kind of passed down, from generation to generation, but I'm sure that you had to kind of dive in and do your own in-depth research. So what was that process like for you when, learning all these things and not inquiring, but putting that into the story in your book?
Well, it was a long process. I have had the chance that on my family, and especially on the palazzo, the building that I inherited from my ancestors in Amelia, there has been a lot of students and professors that have done studies on it and on the family. So I already had a base where I could dive into it. But those informations were mostly, technical, looking more on the aspects like archaeological or architectural. And while for the book, I really needed something more personal. So I spent long days in the National Archives, where the family archives is held, with a magnifying lens, trying to understand and to read everything that could have more of a personal touch. So I didn't want this book to be an annoying list of events and dates and names. I just wanted to put some romance, some fun, some other personal and everyday life of the characters, because these are the characters going from the 4th chapter on are all real person that have lived in that house or in that town. I have their names, I have their stories. Of course, before that, there are no documents. We have no documents, of course, for the Bronze era or for the Roman era, some, but not really related to the family. So there I had to really push my fantasy in trying to build and create characters that could relate to the history of the family.
Nice. So you had to, pull from your fiction there to kind of keep the story going a little bit and fill some of those gaps in terms of answers that you didn't have. So here's my question for you. And I ask it to every author, and it's different for every author, which is why I ask it to everyone. What was that pivotal moment or the spark that made you want to write this book, and particularly about your town, and dive into kind of, the ancestry and just the history of your town, right? So what was that spark that made you want to write it?
Well, the spark was I already published another novel before that with a smaller publisher in Italy, and it was about my grandmother's diaries that she wrote about the Second World War. And that novel was published right before the pandemic. So during the pandemic, I was there, in my apartment in Rome with this book published, and I said, what am I going to do now? And my passion since I was a kid was music. So I've always been a record collector. I've always been passionate about music, pop music, musical theater. And so I wanted to write something about that, but I couldn't find the right inspiration. So one day I was seated in front of my computer, and on my screen I have the photo of my cat that just died a few months earlier. And looking into his eyes, on the photo, I really had this inspiration instantly. It's like I heard him say, "Write about me, write about us, our history." And that moment, I had this idea of the 9 lives, and I said, "How am I going to use the 9 lives of a cat if not spanning them on the history of the town?" A town that I really love. It's a beautiful town in Umbria. Umbria is considered the green heart of Italy. It's right in the center, and it's a beautiful region. And the history of the town, I know it pretty well, but not enough. So I had to dive into that also and studied what happened in the centuries. And so that led me to choose these 9 eras, and then I had to find what ancestor lived in those eras that I chose and build the stories. So I have to say that the cat was the real inspiration. but the book is mostly about the city and the family history, even if he's always there and is another storyline, a parallel storyline to the book. It's not a book about a cat it's not a cartoon cat. It's not a talking cat. It's just his presence is there, and he makes sure that everybody's doing the best for the city.
So if I can just jump in here, the book has 9 chapters, and each chapter is in a different century. So in that chapter, it's kind of like a long short story, if I can say that, each chapter. So each chapter has its own characters, but the characters will be family members or townspeople from Amelia, or people traveling to Amelia from Rome and back and forth. So it's each chapter tells you the story of what was happening in Amelia and in Italy in larger terms during that century. But then each chapter has a different focus. So as he was saying, some chapters have romance, some chapters are around wars, some chapters are around a changing time, like the Restoration or the time when Bonaparte, that's a kind of a transition period. But it's all so interesting to see how this town changes over 3,000 years and how the family changes over 3,000 years. And the cat is there. And the cat, because it's a real cat, not a magical cat, is trying to help the characters do what they need to do. And how does a cat communicate to humans? So the cat is very realistic. And one of the through lines, which for me is very humorous, is the cat's original name is Tito. And every time he's reincarnated, the owners, the Faratini family member who is now his owner, thinks, well, what should his name be? And so he's telegram, it's Tito, it's Tito, it's Tito. And then they come up with these names that are anything but Tito.
Right.
So it's just amusing each time to see he's trying so hard to get them to come up with his real name, but they never do. They never do. So that's just one little thing from the book.
See, I love that. So I have the cover. I'm going to put it up because I want to talk about the cover for a minute. But I love how, the cat is, your transition in between time periods, right? I think that's creative and I think it's clever. I never would have thought of that. And so I think it doesn't come across to me as like, cartoonish, animated little kid. It's not like that. I understand that it's, one of those transitions in between, and it's the constant, which is what blends the chapters together, even though they're taking place in different time periods. Right. And I think that's creative, and I think it's a fun way to kind of do it. Cause I'm sure some of these topics, like war, you mentioned war, and that's a very heavy topic. And so it kind of lightens that a little bit, having this cute little kitty. So I'm dying to ask you, is this a photo of your actual kitty that the book is, in a sense, kind of after?
This is the real Tito, and the photo is taken in the hall of the Palazzo in Amelia. And the strange story about this photo is that I have no idea who took it. It was sent to me, and I had it on my computer, on my file where I have all the photos of my cat. But I put even on Facebook sometimes, does any of my friends or guests took this photo? We don't know who took it. But it was so perfect to visualize the fact that he was in a way the owner of the place, and the fact that he really was there throughout the centuries to be with the family, and to in a way, I wouldn't say run the family, but cats are so influential sometimes, and they really make you do what they want.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I used to have 2 cats. I have 1 cat currently. And the cat that I have I call her my husband's cat. So her name is Alice. She's a calico cat. And very much it's, she will be on top of my refrigerator and look down at me like I'm, this peon. Like, I need you to move, peasant, so I can get where I need to be. Like, I'm very much owned by this cat. Okay. I have 2 other animals in this household, and she owns me. very much so. So I believe that with cats. Dogs, not so much. Dogs just want to be owned and loved, but cats they own their owners, and they are very, I find them to be comical at times, kitties, But the photo on your cover, because I want to go back to that. If you had not told me that that was a real photo of your cat that someone had taken, I never would have known. Like, that is a gorgeous photo. It's literally picturesque, literally picturesque location and everything. Because I would have thought that it was blended, together with your cat and where you wanted it to be. But just to have it as like, that's a photo.
That's a
That's
real
amazing.
photo. That's a real photo, exactly like you see it. It was taken like you see it.
So
Yeah.
this is another difference, if I can say, between the Italian version and my version. The Italian version, they used the photo, but they had it made into a drawing. And it's a very nice drawing, and it's a very nice cover. But for me, the colors, for example, were kind of muted. And I said, well, can I see the original photo? And he showed me the original photo that the drawing was made from. And I very hesitantly, because he might love his Italian cover, I said, well, what would you think about using the original photo? And he said, sure, yeah. So we used the original photo instead of the drawing.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and it's vibrant, and it's, blurred in all the right places, and I think it's something that really kind of speaks to your genre that you're writing in, right? And, that's one thing that authors, at times struggle with captivating their audience with just their cover. So that way the audience knows what the book's about, right? I can look at your cover and I understand that there's like a historical element of Italy in it, right? And this cat is going to be, in a sense, your guide, right? In a sense, like it's a loose thing, but like in a sense, your guide. I get that all from your cover. And that's really ultimately what you want as an author, right? Because you don't want someone, that's a fantasy reader to come across your book and be like, oh yeah, it's gonna be a fantasy book, and it has nothing to do with it, right? So your cover very much speaks to your genre, which is amazing. So kudos to you, both you and Julie, for picking that and saying, knowing your target market. And so with that being done, I can only guess on how long this publishing journey has been about. But before we get into that, I would love to ask, how long did you work on this book? Because it feels like, just hearing you talk and the passion behind it, that it truly was a labor of love. And so I'm curious to know how long that labor of love really took before, you published it in the Italian version, and then you and Julie got connected. So what was the original length of it?
Well, I have to admit that the pandemic helped.
Yeah, I bet it did.
So probably if it was not that period, it would have taken me much longer. The fact that, I was there, nobody could go out. It was a shorter period for me to concentrate and make the studies. But it was not just the writing, it was the research. Right. And as I said, I was lucky to have all these studies that had been done on the family that I could relate on. But the many days that I spent in libraries and in national archives, that was the longest part. And then to make the connections between the real facts and the fantasy, that was the fun part, of course. That was easier, but challenging at the same time, because even creating, I wanted to create something that was real in a way. Right. When you talk about the Roman time and the story that is in the third chapter, it's a sort of a love story. The family is on the point of not having descendants because there is only a male heir, and he's a soldier, and he probably will have to go to war, so he doesn't want to get married. But the cat at that moment has to try to make him fall in love with this girl to continue the descendants of the family. How do you say
descendants?
The descendants, yeah. So I want these kind of things to really feel like they really happen. So what I try to do in the book is, as I said, not to be a boring list of facts,
Right.
but to present the real facts in a way that is pleasant, easy to read, fun to read, and you really, when you arrive to the end of the chapter, you really want to know what's going on in the following chapter. And to make that, I also had to create some bridges, because there are gaps of centuries between chapters, of course.
Right.
You go from the Roman era to the Middle Age, and then from the Middle Age to the Renaissance. There are centuries in between. And so I just wanted to give to the readers some hints and let them know what really happened in those gaps of centuries between one life and the other. And that was also very difficult, because in a paragraph or in just a page, to concentrate a few centuries is not that easy. But
Yeah.
I try to just put the essentials in a way that could be continuation, and there could be a sense, anyway, a storyline that was comprehensible, and not just skip from one life to the other without knowing what happened in the middle.
So back to your question. You said that's just getting to his Italian version. And then he had to get that published, which happened in 2020, as I mentioned. And then, another tale. And then, finally we connect. He had to translate it himself. So he did that. And I don't even know how long it took him to translate it. But I got the translated version in January of this year. So his translation. So for my part, from getting the translation, discussing our project, can we work together? Will it work? What can I offer him, as a publisher? What are my limitations? Getting a contract signed. So I think we signed a contract in like February. And here we are in October and the book is published. So you can imagine, basically from that time, this book consumed my life. Every day, day after day, working on it. So it's a lightning publication of the version. And most of our conversation, or a lot of it, besides the English, the English version, just cleaning up the English and editing, but was about what photos should we use? Is this map correct? Because the map maker, actually I found an Italian-American young man to do the peninsula maps. And he knows Italy, and he was very good in that aspect. But still, you need to change this, you need to do that, please do this. Back and forth, lots of, and Ettore had to be a part of this, because he'd say, no, that's not right. Or, because we have peninsula maps and we have town maps.
Yeah.
That gate is not there. That gate is closed. That old gate is no longer. So, going back to the map maker, going back to the map, please correct it. And so for me, it's really important to find out, after all that work, do readers find the maps useful and helpful and, really add to the book? Because that's what I was trying to do, was add value to the book.
Well, so here's this. Okay, I have to backpedal here. Julie knows this, but Ettore, I am not a traveler. Okay, I traveled recently on a 2.5-hour flight, but I don't leave Texas. So if you haven't realized already, 14 hours and you're still in Texas, which is probably why I've never left Texas, to be honest. But I feel like your book, and Julie, the maps that you have in your book, will help take people to that town in Italy. People like me that don't want to travel, don't like long fly rides, like we're just terrible flyers. But it helps us. I'm a visual learner, right? I'm a visual reader. And so it helps us kind of be in that town and that time period. So the more accurate that it can be, and I know that I can only imagine how painstaking that was. Like I can only imagine from like all angles, right? Because you're talking with everybody and you're like, what? No, this does not go there. Have you never been here? And you're like, oh, we probably haven't, right? So yeah, like I can imagine how that is. But maps with that, especially the genre that you're writing in, is what's going to, at least for me as a reader, make me feel like okay, I have a starting point on visualizing the town, what it's like, and then changes, I'm sure, as they come with, centuries in between and what all that kind of evolves into, and you never know. Watch, maybe you're going to turn it into like this huge tourist destination. All these people are going to get this book and they're going to like be like, this is how it was. I would be one of those people because I'm nerdy like that. But if I was a good flyer, I would do that 100%. So I love the map idea.
Amy, you're exactly right. I think anyone who reads that book, this book, is going to come away and say, I want to go to Amelia. I want to see this town. It's only an hour north of Rome. So for travelers who go to Rome, they can easily do a side trip to up to Amelia. And I was lucky enough, I had the chance in September to visit Italy, and I went to Amelia. And so Ettore is taking me around the town. This is the tower in chapter 5. This is where it happens. This is, the Palazzo, where all of the family, after the Renaissance chapter, this famous architect builds the Palazzo, the family palace or home. This is where this happened. This is the city wall. A whole chapter is about how the city wall came about. And, did a Cyclops build it, which was the legend? Or how did someone back in so far, in the past, manage to build this wall with these huge stones? So to see that wall and the size of those stones, it's just an amazing experience. So I also think someone is going to start a tour company. Read the book, come to Amelia, and we'll go visit all of the sites. From they have I don't know, they have New Orleans tours based on Anne Rice's books and things like that. So I think we might start a new industry in the town of Amelia.
Who knows? I love the name of it. I mean, that's that's an elegant, just pretty name, like I want to go visit it just from the name.
Also, I would like to add that, the town of Amelia is the official origin of the name Amelia. So all the Amelias in the world come from there because the city is so old and it has been the first to have used that name. So is the actual origin of the name of Amelia. So all the Amelias in the world, they come from there.
And they should all buy the book that explains how their name came into being.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. See, that's one thing. If I was ever going to travel, it would be for things like that, like what you just said, because I feel like over in Italy and just in Europe and all these places, their history is so deep and so rich, right? And we don't necessarily have that here in the States, right? But I'm a big history buff, which is like something most people don't know about me. I love it. Like, I just love it. I'd love to be able to go and see castles and hear the history of towns and all those things. And however far back you can take me, please take me. The one place I'll probably never get to is the pyramids because it's hot. Okay. It's hot in Texas and I have to have AC. So I'll probably never get there. Right. But the history, I think, behind it, but you guys' cultural history is so deep and it's so rich. And I think that that's something that should be like celebrated and memorialized, kind of like in your book for this town, right? I think those things are important to keep those, stories, but just the history going and condense it a little bit. So you don't have to go, to all these places to find it. It's a little condensed. You may have some gaps here and there, but it's condensed and it's written in a way where, later generations are going to appreciate it, and I think those things are important. I'm a huge history person. So I'm just like, man, if I wasn't a terrible flight, I mean, I'm telling you guys, this 2.5 hour flight, I was holding on to the like hand thing for landing. Okay. Like, I'm not even joking. And it wasn't that bad. So can you picture me on like an 18-hour flight? I would be terrible. I would be terrible. So I'm going to live through the photos and the stories in your book. Okay. And through Julie when she went. Okay. I'm going to live vicariously through Julie when she went. But I think I am a firm believer as a reader that books like this is what sparks people's love and, wanting to journey and to travel and to see all these places that they read in books. I think that it definitely does that for a lot of readers. So I can only imagine the time that it took you, one, to get the story together, right? And then Julie had to put it together and y'all did lightning speed because here it is. It's October and it's out, right? It's out. You guys can go and get it. you can go and get a discount on your ebook. So make sure that you go and do that. Take advantage of that during launch day today for 2 more days after today. Make sure you do take advantage of it. Remember, the nicest thing that anyone can do is leave a review. Good, bad, it makes all of us better, right? So we want to make sure that we go and we do that and we support you guys. But I want to know, so you said you had a book before this. How many books have you published?
3 in total.
Nice.
And these are all historical novels. After Tito and Amelia, I've published another one that is about an ancestor, always in the family. I concentrated on one of the most important ancestors in my family, who was a cardinal in the second half of the 1500s. And that book came out exactly a year ago, last November, actually. And
in Italian.
In Italian, yes. And so I will probably work on the next year on the translation of that also, because it's an interesting story.
So Ettore about the name Amelia originating from this town. Another interesting thing is not his family, but Amelia Townsman, who was very important to the history of the Americas. And maybe he can just briefly tell about that.
Yes, because in Amelia there was another important family, the Geraldini family, and they had a bishop also at the end of the 1400s. And this bishop, Alessandro Geraldini, was the spiritual consultant of the Queen Isabella in Spain. And he became a very close friend of Columbus. And when Columbus came back the second or the third time, and when they actually realized it was not the Indies, but it was a new world, the Pope told this bishop, go to the America, go to this new world. They didn't know the name yet. Go to this new world and bring the Roman Church there. So this bishop left with Columbus on the 4th or 5th trip, I don't remember exactly. And he went to Santo Domingo, where he created and he founded the first Catholic Church of the New World. This bishop then died there. His tomb is there. So this is not a legend. This is real history. And so there is another connection between Amelia and the United States of America, because the Latin name of Amelia was Ameria with an R. Ameria became Amelia when they switched from Latin to Italicus. So it's after the Renaissance. And there is a legend that we're trying to, let's say, transform into a real fact, that when this bishop arrived there, he said, I want this new world to be named after my hometown. So from Ameria, he made America. Because you're in school, you are taught that the name America comes from Amerigo Vespucci. But Amerigo Vespucci arrived here actually, like 80 years after Columbus. So if we can find a document that says America before that, it will probably comes from the name of Ameria and not from Amerigo.
And not only that, but this bishop, when he was in the New World, he would send back to the Pope and to his family in this town products from the New World. So he sent back tomatoes and potatoes, and the fun one is turkeys. He sent turkeys back, which weren't known in Europe at that time.
Yeah, there is actually a real document that of the day when this couple of turkeys were brought to the Pope. So we know that the bishop sent the turkeys to the Pope as a gift, as a present, to show him what were the things that could come from this new world. But it's not written that he sent them also to his family in Umbria. So the people from Amelia were the first in Europe to know about turkeys, potatoes, and tomatoes and other products of the land that he was sending them. So
See, this is why, yeah, this is why history is so fascinating, because it really does show, connections literally everywhere, right? Oh, I
Yes.
love that. And turkeys, of all things, turkeys, like of all things. I love that. Oh my goodness. I can only imagine their first thoughts when they see these, turkeys. Because they
Yeah,
can
can
get
you
pretty
imagine?
big.
Yeah, can you imagine the Pope looking at the turkeys for the first time back then? That's something. It's an image that is in my head. I don't know why,
You just
but
have
it's
to chuckle, you just have to chuckle because you're just like, man, what would they have said? Like, here come these, like, some of them are pretty giant. So, giant bird. And it's like, what are we supposed to do with it? What does it do? And then it just starts, whatever sound turkeys make, and I'm just thinking about it just makes me smile. It's just the funniest thing. I love
So,
that.
for me, it brings to mind two things. One is, every year at the White House, when the president has his turkey pardon day, and he
Mhm.
pardons one turkey, so it's not going to end up on a Thanksgiving Day table. Well, imagine the Pope there with this, like you say, a turkey who
Yeah.
spread his tail, and he's going, what in the world am I going to do with this? But the other thing it brings to mind to me is the Lewis and Clark expedition here in the United States, where Lewis and Clark travel to the West, and they come across all these animals and flowers and
Yeah.
plants and everything that weren't known on the East Coast. And so they're boxing things up and sending them back to President Jefferson to document what they found in the new territory that they're exploring. So it's the same idea, you're out there in an absolutely unknown to your culture area, and you have to send things back, real things, to say, here's what I found.
I love that. That story is going to stick with me. I feel like forever. Like when, like, after this, I'm just gonna go tell my husband that, and he's gonna be like, "What? What are you talking about?" And I'm gonna have to look it up. Okay, and then it's gonna be this whole thing. But I love that. Did you include that story in your book, or is it one of those things? Because that's what I was dying to.
there's a reference. Yes, yes.
Yeah, because that's what I was dying to ask you. So you have 9 chapters. So you jump, 9 times, 9 lives of a cat. And so how did you make that decision on what to keep in and what to take out and what wasn't going to make it in and those kinds of things? Because I feel like that has to be difficult decisions to make. I mean, I feel like you're a history lover, similar to how I am, and I feel like all of it is awesome, and I want to include all of it. So what was your process, I guess, on what should stay and what shouldn't?
Well, you know what? I mean, the moment that I chose the 9 eras
Mm-hmm.
of the history of the town, so Renaissance, it's almost a century, but I had to find 15, 18 years maximum, so the life of a cat.
Yeah.
So when, for example, for the Renaissance, so many events happened in Italy in that time, and in Amelia, of course. So I just had to go and said, okay, this is the most important, the building of the palazzo. So I chose that. What were the ancestors that were living at that time? And I chose them, and I studied them. For another era, for example, for the Enlightenment in the 1700s, there were not actually very, very important events in the town, but what caught my eye was the story of a young girl with a very funny name. Her name was Felice Idea, that means happy idea. This is her real name. And she had an interesting story because she was obliged to marry somebody that she didn't love. She fell in love with another man. So that chapter is about the love story, on how the cat helped her in a way, not help her, but anyway, he tried to be beside her to finally have her love story come to a positive ending. So because in that century, when I was reading the names and the stories of my ancestors, that caught my attention. So, it was easy, but not easy. I had to leave out a lot of people because if I had to talk about everybody, it would have really taken me
Right.
longer time and at least 9 books instead of one book of about 9 lives.
Oh yeah, it'd be like the size of a dictionary, just
Yeah.
just that one whole thing. So I can imagine, and I am a firm believer that if it captivates your attention and you find it fascinating, it most likely will captivate many other people. Especially, I mean, if you look at just the prime example, of that is like Lord of the Rings, right? And the whole fantasy element of, light versus dark, good versus evil, right? And so having it and morphing it into what it is, it captivated, that author for whatever time. And now, you have all these others. And so that story that you're talking about with the girl and her, her cute name, funny but cute name, right? Captivating and kept your attention. So it's gonna. You telling me the story, I want to read that, and how the cat, kind of plays like its own little kind of role in it. It's kind of like its guardian angel in a sense for each chapter, or guider, in each chapter. And so I'm a firm believer that if it's something captivating you and you find fascinating, multiple other people are going to find it fascinating.
Oh, Amy, you got it exactly. The cat in the first chapter, this is the premise of the story, is given a divine mission.
Oh, okay.
It's to help the town and the family. So in each chapter, he's got to figure out what the problem is. First of all, who is he supposed to be helping, and what does he have to help them with? But the end result is, as I have been saying, you have some chapters that are about romance, and some chapters that are about war, and some chapters that are about other topics, art, culture, development of the town. And so you have all these different kinds of story. The good part is that no matter what kind of reading you like to do, if you like to do fantasy or military or romance, there's a chapter or 2 chapters for you. The bad part is it's not a genre book. I can't sell it. This is a fantasy book. Well, it's got fantasy in it, but it's not a fantasy book. It's got romance in it, but it's not a romance book, et cetera, et cetera. So it makes marketing more challenging, which is why we need you to help us.
Well, yeah, I can see that though, but I can see it being, the best way that I can say, just from listening to you guys talk about it, right? Because you both are very passionate about it, and I love it. And I feed off of that, right? It is, your primary is, it is historical. It is talking about the history of this town, through the time period in which you selected, right? And you have some fictional elements. You got this divine cat that's going to help guide, kind of morph this town a little bit with, each, like time period that he comes back in, right? Which I think is a fun little thing, because history can be a very heavy topic, especially when you're talking about, as far back in a town as you're talking about, right? Crazy things happen in towns, I'm sure, right? And crazy things, dark things, and, changing of time periods over time, right? People change, values change, all those things. And so the one key element, so one genre you can firmly say is it is a historical fiction, right? You have a lot of historical facts in it. You have some fiction elements to tame it. So, I mean, that's, because marketing is just hard in and of itself. It's just hard. But that's my takeaway, which historical fiction is a huge genre. And you have people like me that don't like to travel, and I want to read. That's my travel. Okay. So more things, like this book make Amy happy. Julie knows that. I, walked the Camino de Santiago through her book because I'm not going to go do that. But Julie did, and I read it, and it was great. And so it's definitely a needed genre. So, I mean, that's how I would classify it, which I think is a great genre. And it's a fun spin. I think happy reads and fun spins on historical time, I think is enlightening, because then you can see where it started, where it currently is, and all that stuff in the middle, right? So that's why I find it fascinating. History is just fascinating, how it molds into what it is today, and you can see it molding into the future, right? So crazy time, but I love that you wrote this and that you're so passionate, and you like dive into the research of it. And I can only imagine the hours that you spent, and the pandemic was really on your side for that one, which is good. It was like, you need to write this book, and we're going to make this happen so you can write this book. And I love that. That's like a positive thing that came out of all of that. Right. And then you have another one that you wrote, which I'm fascinated to hear about. So I grew up Catholic, so I know the whole, church hierarchy in the sense of what you're talking about. So I would love to read that book. So you have to let me know when you get it translated, because I'm sure that is painstaking to do. I was in the car the other day driving back from the airport, and that's what I was saying. I was like, I feel like if I didn't know English as my first language and I had to learn it as a second language, it would be very difficult, because we have so many words that mean multiple things. Okay. And they're barely spelt different, or they're spelt the same. And it would be very difficult. So I cannot imagine having to translate your own book. That would just talk about banging your head against a desk. That's just my visualization of me doing it. So kudos to you for doing that and going on that endeavor, is what I'm going to call that for you. That was an endeavor for sure. But it feeds to your passion of writing and your story, right? And making sure it comes across as authentic in every language as it can, which I commend you for. I think that's amazing. And you're with no one better than Julie. Julie is the one, like, that is, I feel like, is Julie's thing, which I admire her for, because she has traveled everywhere. And the way she says things in other languages, just like, the way that I just butchered your name at the beginning and the name of this town, which I'm so sorry. But the way you guys say it is so beautiful. I could sit and listen to you guys just talk and say these names, and I'm in awe of it. So you guys are like a perfect pair, and I absolutely love it. And I'm so glad I got to hang out with you guys and hear about it. And the turkey story is just going to stick with me, because I just think that's great. I just think that is fabulous. And I'm gonna have a dream about what that Pope's reaction was. That's just what's gonna happen for sure. But Julie, you were gonna say something?
No, I was just saying to everyone that when you look at the book, it is a book with a cat, but it's not a cat book. It is so much more. The cat is an essential element, but not the heart of the book. The heart of the book is, as you've been saying, the history of this town and this region, and the history of a family. And Ettore does such a beautiful job of telling us about his town and his family. And so I feel that when you go to Emilia, which I hope many readers will do, you feel like you're walking in the footsteps of this family. And as I said, you're seeing the places that are written about in the book. And it's just a fabulous feeling. And you can go up and touch the wall, this ancient wall that is the focus of one of the chapters. It's amazing. It's just an amazing thing to read and then to experience.
See, telling you, no better pair, because Julie just made me feel like I was at the wall. Like, I don't know about anybody else, but I felt like when she put her hands, I was like, oh my gosh, we're touching the wall. We're going to do this. Yeah. I'm telling you, you guys are like a perfect pair, because Julie now has me sold, but she knows I'm not really going to fly, but I am sold on the whole premise of it. And I'm going to order my copy of the book and maybe a review. That's just what I do. And I love it. But you guys, make sure you go and take advantage. You guys know when we do book launches, we run promotions on these books. So make sure you take advantage of them. It is today, tomorrow, and Sunday. Make sure you take advantage of it while you can. And like I said earlier, the greatest feedback and that you can do for any author is to leave them a review. Good, bad, as long as it will help make them better writers. They want to know about it, right? This is their love and their passion. Their big leap of faith when they jump off the cliff, right? We should be there to catch them with reviews, and it makes them better writers. Make sure you do it in a constructive way. If it wasn't your genre, it's not your genre, okay? There's no need to leave a review. I tell you guys that all the time. But no, you guys, this has been so much fun to dive into. I'm so glad that I got to talk to you guys and get to celebrate with you guys and this book. And I'm in awe, and I'm going to just see, I'm thinking of the turkey and the Pope, and I just can't help but smiling about it. But I'm so grateful, Julie, that you reached out and that I got to do this, and I got to meet you and celebrate this amazing book and this, endeavor is what I'm going to call that you guys have all been on. But you guys, you know, until next time, we're going to bring you some more amazing book launches. It's fall season, launch time. You know, we got a lot going on. But right now, make sure that you go and take advantage of the promotion while you can. But until next time, you guys, bye for now, everybody.